This is the Level Up Engineering Podcast, where we talk with some of the most successful engineering leaders who reveal actionable management insights that help you take your developer team to the next level. This episode is brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications from design to delivery with React, Node.js, and Angular. Check them out at codingsans.com.
Hi everyone, this is Carolina Toth speaking. Welcome to Level Up Engineering Stories. This spin-off of Level Up Engineering is aimed at uncovering stories of successful products, and we talked with Michael Lopp and his experience at Slack before. And now I am here with Radoslav Stankov from Product Hunt. He's head of engineering there, and he will talk about his experience at Product Hunt, how he shaped the company and perhaps how the company shaped him. Thank you so much for tuning in to Level Up Engineering. And first of all, Rado, let me ask you to tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm from Bulgaria. I started my technology career started quite early when I was like 15. I kind of dropped into tech by accident, and I have been in technology quite well. I'm doing a lot of public speaking when there was public speaking. Now I do offline speaking a bit more. I used to organize a lot of conferences and meetups in Bulgaria when we have those, and hopefully I'm going to do them next year if things normalize. And yeah, I have been in technology since 2002, so I'm nearing my 20 years quite soon there.
Awesome. You have a lot of experience to share with your listeners then. First of all, Product Hunt is pretty well known. Tell us a bit about how you ended up there.
Yeah, so I joined Product Hunt 7.5 years ago, and back then Product Hunt was quite smaller. This was just after their seed round of investment. And back at that time, Andreas Klinger joined us founding CTO. And me and Andreas had worked together like a couple of years back at another startup. And he contacted me with Product Hunt, like he wanted to build like the best engineering team he can build. So he contacted me, and during that time I was doing some more traditional consulting work because before that I was a lot in startups. So I wanted to see a bit more of the consulting business, and I found out this was not for me. So I joined Product Hunt, and my original plan for joining was Product Hunt seems cool, and I wanted to do something fun. And my original plan was just to stay year and a half, just shape the core of the product, like the architecture, build up the core team, and then move on. And 7 years later, I'm still here. So yeah, still work to do.
So what was the thing, if we can point out one thing that really made you change your plan and stay there for so long?
So I think the biggest one was Product Hunt is always changing, and there is always things to learn and things to grow. Like the first years, we were very in the startup mode, doing a lot of experiments, trying a lot of new things. I was doing a lot of interesting new technologies. Then we got acquired by AngelList, and this was its own set of challenges. Then it was the revenue era where Product Hunt started to make money. So that was a challenge of itself. Like we even built like an internal and like a SaaS business on top of Product Hunt. And after that, it was the era when Andreas left and I took over as head of engineering. And my goal then was to rebuild the team and focus us more for looking forward for the future. And then we worked on something called Your Stack, which was a very interesting experiment, which we learned a lot. Then 2020 happened, and now we have a new CEO, Ashley, with a new bold vision to combine a lot of the things we learned from Your Stack, some of the core product and changes, and we are launching something called Hyper as well. So there is always something happening, and there is always opportunities to learn and to improve and to grow for me. And I feel that my job is never done here. So there is always something that I just fix something, I improve on something, and then okay, there is a new challenge that needs to be handled.
That sounds like you don't need to leave the company to get into new kind of adventures because they present themselves.
Yeah, a lot of people tell me, yeah, I mean, you're 7 years in one company. And it's like, I mean, it's not one company, like it was 3 legal entities first, but also it was like I can have like 5 different areas or even 6 different areas, like it's totally different companies. The only thing is that I have the whole knowledge of all the things we tried that worked, didn't work. And yeah, and also we have like an amazing team, which a lot of product and team members, like I think I'm the person who has stayed longest in the company, but we have people with 6 years, with 5 years. So there is a lot of people who stayed for a long time in the company.
Awesome. So if you care to share a little bit about how the company looked when you first joined and then how it evolved into what it is now.
So back when I joined, originally Product Hunt, like on the engineering side, was built more on contractors. Ryan was doing sole product, sole community, sole support. Like this was very early on. And when we got the Series A, this is when Corey Hedges joined as a CEO, when Andrea started actually moving from contractors to full-time employees and building the first core team of the product. So it was the time where for like Ryan Hoover's side project, it started to become something real. And right now we are again on the level where a lot of my work now is I'm building the new groups of team leads and splitting the work more into teams and trying to, like, we have a way of working which Andrea started called single player mode, which I developed into collaborative single player mode, where one engineer works on a feature, they own it, they build it, but as you grow, you have to move from individuals to more of cross-functional teams, and this is the challenge right now that I'm like working on to improve and see how I keep the best things from like having the single player mode with more like product teams and stuff around that.
And so how many employees do you have right now?
Oh man, it's a bit hard to tell because every week there is somebody new. Like I think we are around 40 now. I might be wrong. Like we grew quite a bit. Like we almost, I mean not almost, we doubled. We were 20 last year around COVID, and now we doubled. So the whole company is around 40. My team right now is around 10. We have a couple of people outside of company like external DevOps, external QAs, that also like are around me. And right now we are trying to grow a separate mobile team, which we haven't had since the very early days. So yeah, we are changing the company quite a bit the last year.
Right, which I mean, I'm sure a lot of our listeners can kind of resonate with that and think about all the changes that they have had to made in this year and a half of change. So with that said, that you have mentioned quite a few things with the engineering team and its expansion. What are some of the biggest management challenges that you have had to face so far?
Yeah, so on the management side, my biggest challenge was to move from individual contributor to like first like a management role, and which also had individual contributor role, to right now I'm working a lot more with and shaping a lot more team leads and trying to balance like me allowing to code to actually doing the work. And the other big challenge was in the early days when the surface area of the product was smaller, and we always hired for full stacks and people can work on features and own them. And we had a bit more simple structure, and we were a lot more inexperienced when we were a lot smaller. So our mistakes were not that costly. Like if we break something, it was easy to revert. Right now, with a lot more traffic. So having to just think that all the people are moving in the right direction, but they still have the ownership of their tasks, that they're not just some execution units. So this is a challenge, because you always try to just go, okay, do I give too much freedom? Do I do too less freedom? And how much you want to keep stuff that you used to work before and the stuff that's not working anymore. So that's the challenge right now.
Right. And so how do you check back on what you have achieved? What are some of the methods that you use to evaluate your progress?
Yeah, so I have a technique, I call it my manager journal. And this is like every week I have like a log of things that happened. And those are like, I mean, I keep the usual, what was my priorities, what I did, but I also keep what are the things I'm worried about? Like what were some core events that happened to our system? Like maybe we had an outage, maybe there was some argument between the teammates. There was something that was not clear. Or for example, I have a concern that right now, for example, we are building design system, and I have some concerns around how flexible it should be compared to faster performance. So I'm keeping this journal, and I'm having like every week just putting it in a log. So every month I'm checking, okay, is the things I'm concerned the same? Have they changed? Have they been resolved? The other thing is one of my personal goals as a manager is to become not needed. So because again, when the company grows, I have a lot more things to do, so I have to move them back. So I'm like, hey, what are the things which I can just give somebody else to do or teach somebody else to do? So I have a list of things which I notice, like, okay, why I'm the only person who can do this particular or make those decision, and how can I just move that? So those are the two things which try to keep me in check. And of course, again, we have the company goals, other teams executing on their sprints and all of that. But for me personally, this is the things I'm seeing. Like, is my concerns the same every week? Like, I'm concerned for the same thing for the last 6 months, 6 weeks or 6 months. I mean, like, there isn't anything 6 months, but yeah.
This journal is really exciting. Do you have anybody to share it with, or do you talk about your worries with someone in the company?
So I mean, I have blogged around that I use this technique, but the journal for me is something that's very personal, and it's thing that it's like very personal. It's like, I mean, I have like a normal journal as well. And for me, that's stuff that, okay, I'm putting all my real concerns. And some of those are, again, things that are too raw, for example, to share. Like, I try to share some of the concerns when they're like, okay, maybe I have a solution, or maybe I need help for this thing. But it's like very raw data there, just for me. And I try to be very honest. Like, sometimes, I mean, as every normal person, like, I overreact on some situations. So the journal helps me see, okay, oh, maybe that was not that good, or maybe that's not too bad. I thought this was like the biggest success ever with something with it. And I'm like checking a week later, and it's like, oh yeah, that was actually good, but it was not such a big deal. So yeah, it's just for me personally, and I use it to later, again, share with my teammates, share with the leadership, with the CEO, with my peers. Okay, maybe I have this idea of let's improve the product this way because I have these concerns on the product level, or talk with some of the engineers. I have this concern that, for example, it takes too much steps to build a new page. You have to edit like 6 files. Maybe we should. Maybe it's like 5. Let's see how we can skip those. So there is a lot of like raw information that goes to me, but I don't want to overwhelm people with it.
Right. And which is very, like forward thinking of you. I was just wondering what the process might be, so that if some of our listeners want to implement something like that in their own lives, they have kind of your case study to figure it out.
Yeah, so the thing that worked for me, and it changes, like I wrote a blog post, and basically the way I have it is I use a note-taking app called Bear. I just have like a pin note on the table, which is called my weekly journal, and I'm just writing every day, and I'm changing the format of this, and just writing there. Like when I have a thought, I just put it there, just as a cold storage. And I sit every Sunday just for half an hour to 1 hour, depending what was the load, when I'm planning my next week in general for work, my goals for the week. I'm reading through the journal, cleaning it, fixing a lot of the typos, because there is quite a bit of those, since English is not my native tongue, and I write this in English for some weird reason. And I just, get this file, put it in a folder in my documents folder, and just like that. And I don't have much machinery. When I have time, I might do it like an app or something, but for now, just like simple text file, because I think for me, it's more the act of just moving information out of my head into something that I can see and manipulate. Like something which is a concern sometimes is like opportunity actually to improve stuff, because the first step is to recognize there's something's an issue.
Right. Something that needs to be looked at. Awesome. Let's steer over a little bit to something that you mentioned, that English is not your native tongue. And as far as I know, Product Hunt is a remote first company. So you were working entirely remotely even before the global pandemic. And first of all, I would like to ask you about your experience with working remotely before it was the norm for everyone. And then if you could share how the remote work kind of got invented into its best shape at Product Hunt.
Yeah, so to be honest, remote was a lot easier back in the day, which and the biggest reason for this is, and I often say, yeah, my team was remote from day one, we have the processes, but COVID broke a couple of things. Like everybody was stressed, normally we have people, and also people optimize their work environments very, very meticulously, and then their kids, their spouses jump there and combine this with everything. Again, as every normal people, we had those issues. The second thing which COVID destroyed, and we still haven't done those, and I really want to resume them at some point, is in-person meetups. Like we used to gather 2-3 times a year. Like I was, for example, brought my engineering team in Bulgaria for one of the conferences I did. So it was a time just to see each other. So at least 1 or 2 times a year, just for people to align on goals, get to know each other, like the new team members. So this is the things that used, and I hope someday we continue having those, like people get out more. In terms of like the best form of remote. So the way I have seen remote work the best is having a couple of components, and I would expand on those in a bit. So the first one is autonomy. The other one is communication. And the third one is accountability. Like what I mean by autonomy, that means that, and this was the core for the single player mode. The idea is you shouldn't have to, everybody should be able to execute without depending on people. And for me, even on the technology side, the worst thing is dependencies. Like even like on the technical side, like when I have to do external libraries, that's the worst. And it's the same with people and systems. Like if, for example, the reason we still hire full stack engineers is because I don't want to have a back-ender and front-ender that needs to discuss, we need to sync up on a contract for the front-end to talk to the back-end. If it's a one person, they can do it vertically, so they can execute alone, and you as their team lead, you have to provide them with the tools to enable this. Like you have to have the standards, you have to give them guidance on what decisions to make, because if you have autonomy, you make decisions. And the other one is, again, communication, like deciding, okay, maybe we just make a call because we really need to discuss this really fast, or that's not so important and we should write, and we should be clear in our writing the same way we are clear on the code. Like a lot of engineers are still struggling on that side because, again, we try to write concise code, but if you notice the comments engineers write, They're a lot of problematic, like they are too long, they are not very formatted because they don't treat the communication as code. Like, okay, this is the clear instructions. Also with communications, there are different styles between nations. Like, for example, something very clear, people in the US, the way they like information is, this is the problem, this is my solution, this is how I got to this solution. So how do I got to the solution is in the bottom, because if I don't agree with the solution, I don't read it, or vice versa. The people from Central Europe are the reverse. They want to see how you get to the solution. They don't care so much. They care on the methodology. And this is things you need to balance. And the third one is, again, accountability, how people are accountable for their work. Because in the remote environments, for example, I don't track hours from the people because I think this is the wrong measure. I measure the output of their work. And it's really hard to measure people's output when they say, yeah, I mean, I would have done that, but I depend, for example, I'm waiting on the designs, or I'm waiting on the front end, or I'm waiting on the back end. So in order to get accountability for people, you have to give them a clear line where they can execute from the beginning to the end, and they have like the clear goal, so they know they can work. And on the accountability part is exactly like this. You should give them, okay, this is what I expect from you, and I want you to communicate if you have issues getting there. Like, for example, if you cannot hit the deadline, okay, that's fine. Let's see why. Like, I had cases where somebody on my team was like, I won't be hitting the deadline. It's too much. And they say, let's discuss why. And we figure out half of the feature is actually useless. We don't need this feature, and he actually finished faster. So a lot of that part, but it should be clear. Like, that's the reason I really don't like to say, okay, how much time you work. I mean, if you can work 1 hour and do all the work for the whole week, I mean, more power to you. I mean, I would like you to work 2 hours just to finish 2 weeks, but yeah, stuff around that.
Thank you for sharing that. So it sounds like all of your engineers are very senior, both in the engineering sense and in the like personal development sense. Would that be a fair statement?
We have a couple of engineers that are junior, like even 2 of them, this was their first job. And one started with us when he was still in college. So I mean, they're all mature as people. I mean, also, again, we are still teaching ourselves of how to do that. The way I try to get people is, I like the attitude of people. People who want to learn, they have to grow. Like, all the things, again, I'm saying is, this not always works. Like, you always have to develop. Like, yeah, it's in the human nature sometimes to underperform or not to communicate well, or there is the cultural differences, or okay, it's really hard to be full stack. But that's the idea. You want your team to support these good behaviors. Like, for me, that's one of the things I really like working with junior people. Like, right now, my usual goal is I get senior people first, and I have enough senior people so they can actually give enough feedback to the junior. So when the junior person joins and they join in a good environment, they can actually get the good habits, and they can pick up a lot of things even without knowing that. And we had some situations where we had juniors, and again, they didn't pick up those good behaviors just because we put them on projects where they were very outdated, they were very legacy, they didn't work properly with senior people, and unfortunately they didn't succeed because of that. And it was not on them, it was on me, because I didn't realize at the time that you really need to have, like, okay, this is the good way, this is the best practices we have in the team. Because when you work on a system that's older, like our system is 7 years old now, there is a lot of bad practices that were good at the time, because I mean, we are on React, with GraphQL, with Rails, like these ecosystems evolve and our product evolves. So there is parts of our system that I'm a bit ashamed to look at. Now, like they're not written in a way that I would love to rewrite them. I know a lot more now. There is a lot of like things that could be named better, they could be structured better. And this is the struggle when somebody joins a project. They try to pick up patterns in the system. So you have to say, okay, this is the good part. Just if you, for example, if you need to create a new page, this is the pages you should copy stuff from, not those other ones. And this is, again, I think a struggle for all tech companies and all team sizes, because if your company is successful, most probably you have system that works, but they are not, they work, so we don't need to change them. They're low priority, but it's technology. Patterns change, we learn, we as communities learn, and especially again on dependency side, things are not as rosy as they can be.
Right. And with that said, let's steer to the product itself. First of all, if you could share how many visitors or users you have and you have to service on daily, monthly basis.
I cannot share that number.
All right.
Yeah.
That's fine. Then let us talk about the challenges of developing the product itself. What have you had to face?
So we used to have a lot of more scaling issues before we switched to our latest architecture. We were shooting ourselves in the back. I even have a talk called how to shoot yourself with server-side rendering. So we used to have a lot more of those. We fixed those. And over the time, the biggest challenges we currently have are more, not so much on the technical side, are more on the product side. Because Product Hunt have a very simple mental model for users. We have a feed. Every day we get the best products, people vote, there is a ranking algorithm, and that's how the product works. And this is a very clear mental model of how this product works. And one of the things we have to fight is we have a lot of internal systems for preventing people gaming this system, because a good system should be a simple one. And people try to game it because for people it's very important to have a successful product on launch. And also because people depend on us. Like if we change something in our system, especially on the homepage and in the core parts of product, we have to be very careful, because it's not just our product, it's everybody else's product. Like I really like stories where some user, like some kid from India, for example, or somebody from France, just launch an app and it's the top product. It's from this one kid. It beats Google's Stripe or even Apple with their launches. Like, I'm really proud of that. And and this is the thing, not only me, but the whole company is very cognizant of, like, we want to make the system fair for even the smaller players, and also not to break it. Like, imagine, like, again, you're this kid which launches their first app, and this is the day we make some major experiment and change, and because of that, they don't get the traction on product. And this is the thing we have to be very cognizant of. And this is something, as we grow, is a bit more, we have to be more careful. We still have to evolve, because every product has to evolve, but we have to make those decisions. And this is the balance that right now are a very interesting challenge for us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so if you care to elaborate a little more on how you prioritize the product and the design, and for example, some of these changes that might lead you to larger scale improvements to the product, what are some of your decision mechanisms that you use internally?
So this varies. Or so the way we're thinking about is we try to, again, keep metrics so we know we are on the right track, stuff grows, but we also are thinking around two areas, like how can you improve things for the different cohorts of users we have. And the other one is especially the one which we are performing right now in the background, like a lot of the big changes we are doing is, we did this earlier this year when our new CEO Ashley came, is what are the biggest blockers on the system level, and I'm not just talking in terms of like software systems, I'm talking the system on the product itself. What are the biggest things that, okay, if we had this, it would solve this crappy experience we have in this area of the product, or this feature is not very used. And why it's not used? Oh, because we don't have these things. I cannot share details because we're still implementing those things in the background, because we are changing a lot of things from bottom to the top with a lot of experiments of tweaking those. But right now we are trying to see, okay, what were the biggest blockers we had? The other thing we had was we had this product called YourStack, which we worked last year, and we get a lot of learnings from this product because it's like a fresh start. And we noticed what worked there and why couldn't this work at P8, because it would solve this, and this. And this is the way right now we are thinking in our product, like what are the blockers where it's like, okay, if product and didn't exist, and we say, or we come back to the early days where Ryan shipped it just as a newsletter, how would we have designed this system? What are the changes that would remove all these problems, just not solve the problem, just eliminate the problem? Like, this is not an issue anymore. And this is the things that we are right now working on. Like, we are working on a lot of things to improve core mechanics, but we are also doing a lot of things on the background for a lot bigger changes later this year.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. We are looking forward to that. With that said, it sounds like a lot of the engineering improvements, from what you just said to me, sound like these things are really a perspective change for people who are working on the product, so that they don't get kind of cemented into the old ways of thinking or how you used to figure out solutions.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the company quite changed. Like, as I mentioned, we have a new CEO, and the way Ryan working with you is different. And that's the thing. One of the things, especially for me as an old timer in the company, the biggest challenge is changing the product. Like, there is a lot of things we are discussing that we might try it in years past. They didn't work, but they didn't work for certain reasons and the things changed. Or it's like, I don't want to change this thing that we had already. So me as an old timer, this is something which I really appreciate, like with the new leadership, all the thinking of questioning a lot of the core assumptions. So with the knowledge that we want to keep the core working. And this is always very kind of scary, but also it's very excited, because as I mentioned, like, this is the whole company. Every time it's every year is like a different company, different challenges, and I really like working in environments like that because I don't get stale.
Right. Thank you. Is there you have been there for a long time, and I'm sure you have changed a lot as a person while you were growing the company. Is there someone that you particularly loved working with, or somebody that had a huge impact on your development while you were at Product Hunt?
So I really like working with a lot of the company. Like, I don't think there is many people I wouldn't say from the company I wouldn't work with again. The biggest impact for me were Ryan, who is the founder. He taught me so much about thinking in terms of like product, like just the way, how do you think about product? How do you ship stuff? What's perfect to launch compared to what's perfect to implement? How to question assumptions. For me, also, like Andreas who was the CTO before me, I learned a lot about his attitude towards empowering people. I'm still again struggling with, because I really like building stuff, and just for me it's always like, okay, this cool stuff, this cool system, should I give it to somebody else? I really love to build that. So this is always constantly. I also learned quite a bit from a lot of our community team, like for example Jake, who is still at the company, who is leading our community team. I learned a lot from him, the way he actually understands the product from the support side. A lot of his insights are tremendously great because he's the closest person to the user. And we built a lot of internal systems for our community team to support the site, to moderate it, to make sure the whole community is inclusive and good. And I learned a lot from people like that. I learned a lot from from a lot of people from my engineering team, because again, I really like learning technologies, and everybody on the engineering team has something they are particularly knowledgeable, particularly good at. And on the technology side, I learned a lot, like night and day in the last 7 years.
You mentioned a couple times how you were first an engineer and now you're into management and you're responsible for the team. Can you share some tips with our listeners about how you have managed to make that jump from an individual contributor to a manager?
So with me, it happened. So for me, it happened like very gradually. Like before we didn't have a manager, we just had Andreas. So I was just helping people, trying to mentor people the regular way. So when I become a manager, the way when I had, okay, now you're head of engineering, my biggest struggle was, okay, what should the head of engineering do here? Like, should I manage them, ask them? Like, I don't want to do a bookkeeping of people. I trust them. And for me was the thing which helped me the most is to actually figure out this is a separate job from what I used to have. Like and this is something I work closely with my team right now, is not everybody needs to become an engineering manager. You can become a single individual contributor and have the same impact, because those are totally separate jobs. So I just moved professions here. And for me, the biggest challenge is I love to build stuff and build the systems, and how can I balance that? Because in the early days, just removing message view contributor was hurting a lot on the technical side. So I had to balance those two, and I needed to learn. And again, I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of like talking with people on similar positions. I created like a trust circle with friends who are in similar cases that me, and just discuss stuff. And again, I'm still learning the handles. Right now, I'm moving to becoming like from directly talking with the engineers. Now I'm building the engineering managers who took my path. So yeah, I'm still learning, but I think the biggest thing is just realize this is a separate job. This is a new skill you have to learn. It's fine to suck. Just try to get better every day and make sure you're learning.
Right. Thank you for that. It sounds like the entire company is kind of based around this idea that learning never really stops, and the product also has to be kind of renewed as new kind of needs arise for the users as well.
Yeah, exactly.
With that said, what is one thing that you could suggest to anybody who is building a product or launching something on Product Hunt, or thinking about becoming an innovator? What is one thing you want to tell them or you want to suggest?
Yeah, ship earlier. Like a lot of people ship too late, but ship early doesn't mean ship something that doesn't work. Just try to see what's the core thing that makes your product unique, and just ship that in the best form possible, and the rest just would come out later. Like, for example, once when we launched Your Stack, we didn't have a lot of functionality. It was just wired with, I call it with the wireframes. And we just manually were doing like a database changes instead of just having admin panels for stuff. For a lot of things, we're using like no-code solutions just to get this on the ground, because you actually want to understand what the product is. That being said, if your product is very technical, like if you're shipping a new database engine or something very technical, there you should again focus on the core thing, like what's the core thing on the product that makes sense.
Thank you. It sounds like a lot of user-oriented thinking has to go into any kind of new product that is being launched.
That's the thing I think I learned the most in Product Hunt is thinking like again from firm principles and why are we doing this? Like why is this thing needed? Why we are rewriting our, let's say, backend? What's the goal in the end? Not just okay, we want cleaner code.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that's a really good point to end on. We have talked a lot about Product Hunt and about your position and how you have evolved into who you are today. Is there anything that we haven't touched on and you would like to share with your listeners?
No, I think we pretty much covered quite a bit of ground.
Yes. Thank you for sharing so much. You have appeared on quite a few places on the internet. Where should our viewers or listeners follow your work? Where can they get in touch with you if that's what they would like to do?
Yeah, so people can just reach me on Twitter. My DMs are open. I also try to blog more and share a lot of the things I'm thinking about because I always get like amazing feedback. Also, on my personal website, I just have a list of all the talks, podcasts I'm appearing just so I can remember them and reference them later.
Awesome. So be sure to check that out. And with that said, I thank you for joining Level Up Engineering today. This was a special episode called Level Up Engineering Stories. And today, my guest was Radoslav Stankov, head of engineering from Product Hunt. We talked a lot about how to make a product successful and about how to lead an engineering team that works perfectly or quite close to perfect in a fully remote organization. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It was quite fun.
I'm glad to hear that. With that said, dearest listeners, I am Karolina Tóth, and I hope to see you next time.
Thanks for staying with Level Up Engineering. If you enjoyed this podcast, so will your friends. Share this episode on your favorite social networking platform. To stay up to date with our content, follow Level Up Engineering on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Google Podcast. Brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications with Angular and Node.js. Check them out at codingsans.com.